Oh, hey, over there, Facebook. So, hey, yeah, Dr. Shannon Coates. I am here in a little town that is north of Toronto in Canada. That's right. And I come on here relatively frequently, about bi-monthly, give or take, maybe twice, sometimes 3 times a month, sometimes less, and do some live office hours where I just talk, just laugh. Voice pedagogy related, lots of stuff I'm talking about. Often I'm talking about things that are not necessarily about voice pedagogy, but just about like teaching, how we teach pedagogy, you know, just like that. So that's what I do with these live office hours. What are we talking about today? We are talking about a kind of voice pedagogy thing. This is both voice related and sort of specific to teaching voice and to perhaps learning voice or learning singing or anything along those lines, as well as pedagogy related. This is very much intertwined. This is not necessarily just pedagogy. This is intertwining. And the title that I gave to this one is There's No Such Thing as Open Throat. Because I do like to be, you know, as annoying as possible. I do like to just be like, as possible, especially on social media. So and then I listed a bunch of other things, right? So I called this one, There's No Such Thing as Open Throat, and then I listed a bunch of other things. I've got them over here. So like, there are a whole bunch of things and terms that we use in singing lessons to describe our own process, etc., that we use all the time, that come up especially in Western classical singing, but it comes up all the time in lots of other styles, where we use these terms as if they are objective, measurable phenomenon, and as if they feel the same and have the same outcome for every singer we work with, right? And we use them in such a way that people get really, like we get so attached to some of these ideals or some of these phenomenons, and we get so attached to being right about these things, like so attached to being right about them, that, you know, we get really mad when someone, for example, when someone says, hey, in order to get that ring in a Western classical sound, or that twangy sound in some contemporary styles or music theater, we're actually narrowing a part of the throat. There's a narrowing happening. There's a specific kind of narrowing that is happening. Hey, in order to sing upper pitches, in order to sing higher pitches, the larynx is rising. In all voices, it doesn't matter what style you're singing. When you get to the top of your range, your larynx will rise. It has to go up. It's not doing the thing. But then as soon as we say, these are the things that are actually happening, these are objective, measurable, we can see these things happening, we got an MRI on it, we know these things are happening, people get so up in their feels about it. They are butt hurt about, no, if you say that, you have to have open throat. Larynx must be low, or else it's unhealthy. I have seen folks on the socials say things like, well, the reason that your belting is unhealthy is because you're not doing it with a low larynx. Like you're letting your larynx rise while you're belting, and in order to keep it healthy, it has to be a low larynx. No, it does not. It does not. You have to have an open throat. And if you tell people if you tell people you are harming people, this is harmful information. No, it's not. Open throat is not actually a thing. It's not. Let me tell you why open throat is not actually a thing. Open throat is not actually a thing because there are no muscles that actually open the throat. There's nothing in your physiology that when those muscles engage, actually something that increases the diameter of the throat. There are ways that we can release muscles. We have lots of constrictor muscles. We have lots of muscles that pull the larynx up. There are lots of ways that we can change the shape and make it more narrow or change the diameter of the throat. I'm just talking about this space here. There are lots of ways we can do that. But all of the ways that we do that in order to engage musculature, in order to do that, we are engaging the muscles to go this way. We only have narrowing capability in terms of engaging muscles. When we are opening the throat, it's not even really a thing, but let's just say muscles are released, have to be released. We're not actually engaging to open the throat, right? In some senses. The other thing is that lots of the terms that we use, I'm going to talk about a couple of the other ones too, but lots of the terms that we use are terms that we have borrowed from, bel canto, whatever. We've borrowed them from 1700s, 1800s. We've borrowed them from other languages. So when we're using these terms in English, we have borrowed them from other languages, and they originated as descriptors of what someone who was singing thought they were doing. So someone in the 1800s, 1700s, 1600s was like, oh, that's the tonal outcome I want, and I am doing these three things. Therefore, it's an open throat. Dude, that is someone who is way back in the day describing their experience of creating a sound. They don't have an MRI. They don't have anything. They're not looking inside their throat and being like, yes, look at all that open space. No, they're not. They sense something. They have external. They are looking at things externally from the outside and saying, oh, look at how open that is. But you know what? This open can mean that I'm very, very narrowed here. Open on this part doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what I'm doing in this part, right? Like those two things can be completely opposite or can tell us opposite things. And my sensation of open throat, that's fine. That's your sensation of it. But what happens is we get really, really wedded to the fact that this is what's happening in my body. Is it? First of all, how are you even describing what open throat is? Because which muscles, what are you even talking about? And secondly, do you have an MRI on you 24/7 so you know what's happening? No, you don't. No, you do not. One of the other things that it's, tossed around a lot is forward placement or placement at all. And I've talked about placement before as well. The idea, obviously, we all know it. We all know I can't place the sound. Why? Because there's no, the sound waves are always going through the same space, right? They're all traveling from but they are reverberating, they are oscillating, they are generating, resonating in this space. That's where they're traveling. So we all know this. It's not like when I say, oh, I'm placing it in the mask, or I'm placing it forward, or I'm placing it farther back. The sound is not all of a sudden now here, but that's the problem. We talk about these concepts as if they are real things, as if this is something that is definable, as if this is something that, and also if you're going to feel it in exactly the same way as I feel it, right? So I, as the teacher, I come in and I'm we're looking for a specific kind of tonal outcome. A brighter tonal outcome, perhaps a tonal outcome with a little bit of ping in the tone, twangy, bright, or whatever. We're looking for perhaps some of those that maybe we're looking for a richer tonal outcome, and so we might ask someone to place it farther back in the throat, right? Maybe. So we're asking for asking for a specific kind of tonal outcome. Now, me as the teacher, at some point in my life, a teacher said to me after I sang in a specific way, "Yes, that's forward placement," and I went, "Okay, I guess that's what forward placement feels like." I don't know. Sure, okay. Yep, I can feel it buzzing in my forehead. Some people do feel that buzz in their forehead. Some people do not. Oh, yes. Even if you could place it. Yeah, even if the sound wave could travel, the sound wave does travel sympathetically through our tissue, but that's not useful for the actual tonal outcome, right? That's not contributing to the tonal outcome because it's stuck in the tissue. For me to feel that in my nose, say, or in my forehead, or my eyeballs, whatever, for me to feel that, some people feel that, some people don't, fine, whatever. But I, as the teacher, when I'm telling you, no, you have to place it in the mask, or you have to have forward placement, you have to do this, I'm assuming so many things. I'm assuming, A, that you as the singer are going to feel that in the same way that I feel it, first of all, are going to respond to that in the same way that I respond to it, are going to have some way of organizing toward that tonal outcome through that directive. It's not a thing. Forward placement, it's not a thing. Placement of the sound is not a thing. It is, however, same with open throat, a very useful way to describe the way we are experiencing something if it is a description that comes from the singer as they are experiencing it. Let me say that again. All of these terms can be very useful in the studio if we are not imposing them on the singer. If it is something that the singer says, hey, that feels like it's really far forward in my nose somehow. Amazing. You and I know, singer and we know, it's not actually more in your nose. It's not actually more in your forehead. It's not actually coming out the top of your thing. It's not actually here. It's not actually, we know that, right? We know that about the sound. Well, I know that about the sound. Sometimes singers do not, because they have been told that these are objective, measurable things that are physiologically possible, and they are not. And so when the singer, though, experiences a specific tonal outcome or experiences the creation of a specific tonal outcome and then describes it saying, oh, my throat feels so open. Okay, that's what open throat feels like for you. And when you come to open throat sensation, probably you're going to have this kind of tonal outcome. So now we have something to like have a like as a marker, if you will, or as a descriptive, if you will, for that singer that is useful to the singer when they are the ones who are using the terms to describe their own experience. It is not useful. And also when we are really clear saying, oh, that's an interesting way to feel the sound. That is an interesting way to feel that coordination. Love that perception of the sound or of how you created that sound. I love the perception of what it feels like to experience the sound. So we as the teachers, it is our responsibility not to say that that is what's happening, but to say that is a really interesting perception of what is happening in the sound. See the difference there? Those are two different things. When I say to the singer, this is what's happening, you are placing it more forward, what does that communicate? It communicates to the singer that it is possible, physiologically possible, to place the sound. Like just saying the words is like, it's so ridiculous. It is not possible to place sound, right? But when I say, oh, that is a really useful way to perceive that sound. So when you make this sound and it sounds, maybe it sounds twangy, maybe it sounds bright, maybe it feels forward. Great. All those things. Or sorry, maybe it sounds twangy, bright. Maybe it sounds twangy, maybe it sounds bright, maybe it sounds like it has core, maybe it sounds like, I don't know, all of the things that we describe those sounds. And the singer says that feels forward. Great. You have something useful there to be able to describe your experience of making a bright sound. So this is not a forward sound. This is a sound that you sense as forward, or you perceive to be forward, but that is a bright sound. Right. So some of the things that they have taken on, we're sort of trying to deconstruct and be like, well, there's no forward, so okay, but that feels a little gaslighty too, right? Where you're like, well, it's not really forward, like you can't, there's no such thing. I consistently reframe, ooh, that is a really interesting perception. That's a useful perception. So I'm constantly saying that's a really useful perception. It feels forward. When they say, oh, it's more forward, I say, oh, it feels more forward. The singers I work with, voice teachers I work with, often don't realize until they listen back to a lesson, or until we've gone through something like, you know, we're reviewing some of their teaching or something, or reviewing me working with them or working with one of the singers they work with, and they'll say, okay, so I see how I am consistently saying that the perception is actually the thing. And I see you now, see what you're doing there. Because every time I say that it is a forward sound, it is a open sound, it is, what are some of the other ones? Oh, this is a mixed sound. This is a, oh, I'm using breath support. Every time I say this is chest voice, I say, oh, Shannon, are in there going, oh yeah, you're perceiving that as chest voice. Oh yeah, you're feeling like that's a heady mix. Okay, so that sensation is of forwardness. Like I'm just 24, just reminding you that this is perception based. This is how you're experiencing the sound. This isn't what's happening. These are not physiological realities, right? Now we can get in the weeds in terms of like, yeah, but if I'm experiencing it, then it is reality. Yes, it is. Yes, absolutely. But your experience of the thing, let's be clear, is your experience of the whole thing that is happening. So your experience takes into account, your perception of everything that is happening takes into account the entire instrument. Yeah, it's perception based, right? Takes into account the entire instrument, everything, all of these thousands of little coordinations that are happening at the same time. So I'm perceiving, and then I'm just putting my attention on one thing, which is great. I'm putting my attention on this one thing, and I'm sort of assigning this one thing to this, all of these massive coordinations to this one thing. And that's great, but we could never, there is no way that anyone ever can name all of the things that are happening in order to create a specific kind of tonal outcome. It is not possible for you, singer, for you, voice teacher, to name all of the things. It is not possible. If we were to say, well, in that sound, if we were to actually list all the physiological things that were happening, we'd be here until the end of time trying to describe all of the things that were happening, because there are so many and they are so fast and they are so complex. All of these things happening so instantaneously at the direction of the brain, tell the body what to do to coordinate toward that specific tonal outcome. And so we do need these shorthand terms. We do need these shorthand terms, absolutely. But we get in the weeds when we open throat sensation. For example, when I think, oh, that is the thing, and I must sing with an open throat sensation. Sorry, I must sing with an open throat. I must have an open throat, or I will be unhealthy. I will not, like, there's lots of consequences to not doing some of these things correctly, right? Then when I do want to create a different tonal outcome, when I do want to create some sound, even within Western classical singing, when I'll find more ping, it may not feel the same as what it feels like when you do open throat. So what does that do? That gets me really locked up in my head, but also in my body, because I have told my body that I must always have open throat. And then when I want to perhaps narrow some things in there in order to create a different kind of tonal outcome, or in order to create perhaps a little bit more brightness or a little bit more cut or all of those things in the sound, I get really locked up because I can't not have an open throat. Open throat is the way that you are describing the sensation, singing in that particular way. It is not the right way, it is not the wrong way, it is simply the way you are experiencing creating that tonal outcome. And it accounts for not just open throat, it accounts for everything in the body that is coordinating together to allow for you to be able to create that tonal outcome. All of those things together. So when I start to reframe and I say, oh, the sensation of forward placement, or the sensation of chest voice, or I have a sensation of a mixed voice here, or I'm experiencing this as mixed voice. One of the other ones, open throat, mixed voice, breath support. Oh yeah, I'm experiencing breath support here. I'm experiencing this sense of support. Great. What does that do? It releases us. It allows us then to experiment and be like, what else can I sense? What else can I experience? What else? How else can my body create sounds? It releases us to be able to experience. And it also releases us to hear new science. Like, say, for example, when Carrie Obert comes along and does incredible research and says, we're narrowing some of these spots in the pharyngeal space. We're narrowing some of these, and the tongue is doing some of these things, and the tongue is actually engaging. We don't need the tongue to be released in some of these in order to create these sounds. In fact, we need the tongue in some spots to be super engaged in order to create these sounds, these specific kinds of sounds. It releases us to be able to accept that that thing is happening without getting mad. Wait, no, the tongue always has to be released. No, it really doesn't. It really doesn't. You may want to always have a sensation about released tongue. That may be your sensation of it, and that's amazing, but that's your perception of it. That isn't what's happening physiologically. You don't know what's happening physically. Okay, sorry, let me go back. Just this week I had a student say he didn't feel he had the vocabulary to describe how he feels the support. I said, that's okay as long as he's bringing awareness to it. Yeah, so this is another thing that happens as well, is we also then, voice teachers and as singers, so voice teachers in particular, because I work mostly with voice teachers, what happens when I'm working with voice teachers is the main pain point becomes, but how will I know when they have an open throat? How will I be able to tell them how to get breath support? How will I be able to, because I don't understand all the physiology necessarily, how can I get them to have a better mix? How can I get them to have better better placement? How can I get them to do all of these things? Because I don't have the terminology for it. I can't describe it. I don't understand it physiologically. Guess what? Very few people actually do understand it all physiologically. The people who are telling you they understand it and then that's what that is, unlikely that is what that is. How many people have been told their whole lives that they have to sing with a raised soft palate, or else they're gonna, I was told that my whole life, that I had to sing with a raised soft palate as I was, come to find out, hey, guess what? When you told me that I was singing with a raised soft palate, it was actually more just that I had a width in the back. And you had no friggin' clue whether or not my soft palate was high or low or medium because you didn't have an MRI on me. You don't know. You have a sensation. And somewhere along the line, someone told you that if you have a raised soft palate, then you won't have a nasal sound, which is also a whole other thing. Let's just not go there now. But when we move out of this thing is this corresponds to this, or this is what's happening. When we move out of that, it releases us to be able to teach better, and it releases singers to be able to describe their process better, or to notice their process better. Because now I'm not looking for breath support. What am I looking for? I'm looking for a tonal outcome, and then I'm going to describe what my body does in order to create that tonal outcome. I'm going to try to find the tonal outcome first. So we're going to use things like, I don't know, if I'm looking for more breath support, maybe I'm going to use some things like bending, or doing some things that I want to do some crunches. I want to do some things that'll help me to feel like I'm strong in my body. Maybe see even some of these actions that I'm doing right now. As soon as I talk about having more breath support, what do I do in my body? I do this. I do oh yeah, I want to get stronger in my body. I want my legs to bend a little bit more maybe. So now I'm working with that singer, and I say let's play with being, I don't know, a chimpanzee. Let's see what happens when you get kind of goofy like that. And now let's sing, and let's just see what happens. And is that the sound that we're looking for? Yeah. Okay. So what's your body doing in order to create that sound? All right. So, and not just what's your body doing, because folks will default to, well, I'm supporting more. Are you? Okay. How do you know that you are supporting more? Then we start to say, well, let's look. It feels like my thighs are actually really strong right now. Okay. That's something is objective, right? Objective, or as objective as it can be. That is a perception that I can really actually get behind, right? I can use that as an assessment, if you will. What else does it feel like? Well, it feels like my hips are really released. I was working with a singer just this week who we were talking about. She was saying how she actually, I'm trying to remember, she said it felt like she was tucking to go in to lift off, which meant, and I'm like, okay, tell me more about that. And she's like, well, my knees are kind of bent, yeah, but it's not that. It's more that I feel like I'm bending a little bit at the hip joint, like I'm 2 degrees forward from the hips. I'm 2 degrees forward from the hips. And I'm not, and my shoulders are just a tiny bit rounded, actually. And that's what it felt like for her. And she was getting the tonal outcomes she wanted, and she was getting the access to the breath that she wanted in order to create the tonal outcomes she wanted to create. So for her, that's what it felt like. So we talked about this kind of tuck and launch feeling. It felt like tuck and launch. Okay, that's what that is for you. Great. If I had told her to have more breath support, what happens? Nothing happens. Even if I had told her to go tuck and launch, because it comes from me and I'm telling her body what to do rather than she's discovering it and describing the process. Those are two different things. Yes. I have to have worries about this. I think there's big problems with giving ideas as absolutes across the board. Yep, yes. Sometimes students, yes, this is a whole thing. Students and clients often want an absolute. We have been taught that there is a right and a wrong answer. We have been taught that the reason that I come to the singing teacher is because they know the right answer. They know what I am supposed to do in order to make the sounds I want to make, right? We have been taught that if I go to the expert will tell me what to do, and then I'll be doing it right. These are all the things. And so now when I get into this happens all the time in the voice ped undegree. When I'm working with voice teachers, voice ped undegree, we often the students that they are working with are like, yeah, please just tell me what to do. Or please just tell me, is that right or isn't that right? Or just tell me, is that my mix? Is that my high belt? Is that is that what I'm looking for? Is that the thing? And so we're always walking this we're always sort of assessing where singers are in their student-led learning journey, right? Or student-directed learning journey, because often folks are not ready yet to have that kind of experience around describing their own process. They've just never been given these choices before, these options before, right? And so we are often in this process of, let me ask you some questions. Did you love it? What part did you love the most? Okay. So if you liked it, let's do that, whatever that sound is, or if you liked it 70%, great. Let's do it 3 or 4 more times, and let's see if we can move that, what you liked, up to 80%, maybe 85%, and then talk to me again about what you liked. And then I might tell you whether it is or isn't what you want. But I probably won't. But in some cases, yeah, there are cases where you're at that sort of baby bird feeding stage, You know, it's just the beginning of the learning journey for them, but it's also the beginning of the, not necessarily the learning journey, excuse me, it's the beginning of the self-directed learning journey. So they're sort of just at the beginning of that, you know, their ability to sort of self-assess and their ability, and also their ability to trust themselves. This is a tough journey. If you have been told your whole life, if you are a well-trained singer and all of your teachers have always told you what to do and how to do it, and whether or not the sound is right, or whether or not you are making the right sound, it's very challenging to now be able to trust your own self, because you don't have any tools to trust yourself. You don't know what you're supposed to be listening for, because the teacher's always told you. So this is part of it, is especially as we become well-trained singers, especially in Western classical traditions, where the goal is for everything to sound like it is the same register, right? It's we want a very seamless sounding voice from the bottom to the top on every vowel shape, on every dynamic. And so that leads us, I'm not talking about color here, I'm talking about sort of fundamental sound, right? That's what we want to be able to perceive. And so what happens is the more well-trained we are, the more we take a sensation like open throat, for example, or breath support, or what are the other ones, forward placement, or whatever it is, the more we are like, yes, that's what that feels like from the bottom to the top of my register, my range, no matter what register I'm in, no matter whether, like, of course, that's what it feels like. And so, especially when we're working with voice teachers who are very much used to working with folks who are well-trained singers, and who are not necessarily used to working with singers who haven't yet achieved these kind of coordination, these sort of consistent coordinations. And so what happens is voice teachers, and singers, we get a curse of the expert going on, right? Where we're like, well, yeah, if you sing an ah vowel from the bottom of the range to the top of the range, that it's all going to feel like it is open throat. Of course it's open throat. And of course your larynx is going to be low the whole time. And of course that's not going to change when you sing an E vowel. Meanwhile, all of the little tiny changes that are happening all the way up as you move, like there are thousands of little tiny changes that are happening, all of these little adjustments, you don't notice them anymore because you're a well-trained singer. So you don't notice them anymore. And so now you're describing something that is 1,000 little tiny changes as being, well, it's just open throat the whole way up, the whole way down. It's just low larynx the whole way up, the whole way down. Just keep that forward placement. Doesn't matter what vowel you're singing, just keep that forward placement. Because to you, as the well-trained singer and or voice teacher, who has only worked with, well-trained singers, especially, that curse of the expert comes in and says, well, yeah, that's what it feels like. Yeah, because you don't remember what it feels like to be uncoordinated. It all feels exactly the same to you now. It all feels like, you might be able to notice that your tongue is doing a little change here or whatever, but like it feels exactly the same to you now. You're not noticing any of those changes anymore. When in fact there are like thousands of little changes happening. But this is the issue often when we're using these terms as if they are objective. Chest voice. No, chest voice is the way we have been describing the sensation. It's the way we describe our experience. The way some guy back in described the experience of singing in specific ways. And it is describing the totality of all of the things that are happening. And then when we start to get science and we start to be like, oh, chest voice, that means thick folds. Yeah. Plus a lot of things. And sometimes high belts is not thick folds. It really isn't. It's all just about the acoustic shaping. Because if I'm singing on a C5, which is the C at FAC, that one in the treble clef, if I'm singing on a C5, that's thin folds. Well, folds have to be thin by that time, by that pitch range. Well, okay, maybe not C5. Let's say D5. So the D above that C. Every good boy deserves, that one. You're welcome for my old-fashioned note names or staff names. So I can make it sound like a belt. I can make it sound like it's chest voice, but it's all acoustic registration. It's all how I'm shaping my vocal tract. It has nothing to do with whether or not my vocal folds are thick. So is it chest voice? Sure, you are using chest voice to describe your experience of the sound. Not if you're using chest voice to be like, well, here's what's happening laryngally. I remember a while ago when working on a high belting, I had a teacher saying I mustn't be belting anymore because of the pitch. And then another teacher saying, how can you take chest voice that high, right? I know. Yeah, because a little bit of science gets in there, right? A little bit of science gets in there, and we learn a little bit of science, and then we're like, oh, that's what must be happening, which is amazing, and I love it. And also, please keep using those terms to describe the experience of creating the sound versus saying this is objectively what's happening. Yes, it is. It is. It's absolutely more to do. Well, I'll say when we're in that high belt sound, what we're doing is shaping, right? So acoustic registration is what we're doing. So we're shaping the vocal tract in order to intensify specific parts of the sound wave. And so that's what gives it that ringy sound. And that's only possible in a specific chunk of the pitch range. That's only possible because of science. That one actually is because of science. But that's only possible in that specific, in a specific chunk. There's only, belt sound is only possible in a specific little chunk of sound, in a specific part of the pitch range. So that belt sound, and the reason that it sounds like that is because of the way we're shaping the vocal tract. There is also some pressurization stuff going on there too, but it is not because we are like keeping thick folds all the way up. It's not what's happening. It's just not that simple, right? It's just not that. There are a lot of things going on at once. Hey, I work with a lot of 13 to 16-year-olds who come to me and say, I want to work on my mix. Yes, they've learned that language. It's hard for them to readjust to another way of describing it. What are some ways to encourage them to not get so stuck in, I want to strengthen my mix, which is their language? Yeah, 100%. So the ways that I work on that to kind of get out of it is, let's do some listening. Let's do some listening, and you tell me what is the closest to what you want to sound like. So then we start to describe, okay, so now let's describe that. So how are you hearing that sound? I don't want to hear mix, right? I don't want to describe it as mix because that's not useful, because mix can mean anything. What I want to hear is things like, well, I hear it is something I heard recently. I think I've used this before, but something I heard recently that I just absolutely love is it's got texture in it. Okay, tell me more about that. That's a textured sound. Oof, okay. So, and then when they're describing the sound, maybe they'll say, well, it's really bright. Maybe they'll say it's really loud. Maybe they'll say it's really forward. They might say it's really forward. And there are so many ways when we give people options to describe the sound outside of the terms that are not useful, or perhaps not useful, you'd be surprised what they'll come up with, right? And then we say, okay, where do you feel like, let's sing through some scales, or let's sing a couple of songs, or you sing the song where you feel like you get closest to that texture or to that sound. And then we work from there, right? So now we have a place where I understand what you mean by mix and what you're actually going for. So I'm not guessing anymore. And you also have a way to tell me, rather than saying, oh no, that's not quite it. You have a way to tell me. You can say, oh, that didn't have enough texture in it. That got way too smooth. Great, let's go back to the spot where you felt like you had 70% texture, and let's just see if we can build on that. What are you doing to get the texture in that sound? What's happening in your, what's the sensation in your throat? How do you know that you're doing X, Y, Z, right? Like, what are the sensations of it? So we're building from the thing that they're describing rather than using the language that they think they're supposed to be using, as well as rather than me just guessing what it is that they are trying to tell me. Do I have any pointers to research into the pitch ranges necessary for belting? Where does it sound like a belt? About A5, right? A G sometimes sounds like a belt. Depends on who's singing it. Yeah. Perhaps if you've had a testosterone-led puberty, an F might, like an F5, the F above middle C, that might sound like a belt. Might. Approximately there to where does it stop sounding like a belt at the top of the range? Depending on your instrument, usually about an E or an F, right? Stop sounding like a belt. There are acoustic reasons for that, having to do with performance. Well, I don't know, performance has kind of fallen out of favor now, but having to do with which part of the sound wave we are intensifying through shaping. Essentially, real quick, essentially, if we are intensifying in that specific pitch range, if we're intensifying the second harmonic in the sound, that will give us quite a belty, twangy sound. That'll give us that contemporary belty, twangy sound. So the way that we shape to intensify that second harmonic means that we have lots of narrowing in this area and lots of shallowing in this area, right? So that shaping is going to intensify, or is going to shape in order to intensify the second harmonic in the sound. And so once you get to, say, 5 or an F5, once you get to an F5, like the F at the top of the staff, the second harmonic is the F an octave above, and hardly anybody's able to get narrow enough to actually intensify that harmonic That's a very high fast frequency. It requires a very small shape. And so what happens is we end up intensifying the first harmonic, which means that basically everyone starts to sound, you know, like we all start to sound basically the same. It doesn't sound like belting per se anymore. You already know intuitively. You knew that intuitively. Listen to anybody, you'll know. You knew that intuitively. Basically that F to F. Listen to anybody singing the F below, like the F, like middle C. Has anybody ever belted a middle C? Not really. Some folks who've had a testosterone-led puberty may be able to create a belty sound in that middle C, but it mostly sounds like, you know, sort of chest voice. We experience it not with that like exciting kind of like pingy, twangy sound in the middle of the chest voice, right? You just can't tune to that second harmonic. Yeah. Because, well, and part of it is that you're too low in the pitch range. So if I'm singing the first harmonic, I've got my shaping toward that first harmonic, and it has to be more volume in order for that first harmonic in order for the first harmonic to actually exist. And then if I over, you know, like I can't then also shape toward emphasizing that second harmonic at the same time, because then I will be too small. It'll be not enough volume for the first harmonic to sound. Yeah. That's exactly it. Yeah. Which is why you can be in chest voice and not be belty. Chest voice. Why we perceive it as chest voice, right? Okay. That's enough of that. And boy, was that a fun little like deviation. Thanks so much for asking. Actually, that was fun. Super fun. Okay, great. Very few of the terms that we use to describe singing processes, or that we use to say, yes, that's what's happening right now, are actually associated or are actually real things in terms of that's objective, and yes, that is describing the whole process. Also, very few of these terms, if any, emerge as something that we can objectively measure. Twang is something that we were working toward objectively measure, but open throat is not something we can measure in the sound. Neither can we measure that as in terms of like what's supposed to be happening here in terms of like the shape or whatever. Like you'll have to be this many millimeters or like that's not, we don't just, it's not possible. So these are the vast majority of these terms that we use as if they are objective and as if they are a way to describe the physical process of creating the sound. The vast majority of these terms came out of folks describing their experience of the sound or their experience of creating the sound. And so then we mistakenly were like, well, that is the way that you must do it. Like when you hear like Pavarotti, when you hear some of the greats talk about singing, they talk about it as if these are like objective things that everybody must experience. You're like, okay. That's how you are experiencing creating the sound. Good for you. All right. Take good care, friends. Have a great weekend. Blah, blah, blah. You know, all that stuff. Yeah. Take care. Have a great weekend.